D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you inside Bridgestone Arena. Predators host the San Jose Sharks tonight to wrap up this 5-game homestand. The Predators going for win number 4 in a row against the San Jose Sharks tonight. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, of course, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We got a full house. Willie's here on time.
What's up?
Glad to see you, my friend.
Very glad to be here, boys.
We had
we had an optional skate, so we're ahead of
It was
schedule
optional.
today. We're ahead of schedule.
I always liked an optional skate. Less you had to do, you know?
He could be back, in and out very quickly.
Yes.
So
We will talk Predators today as they look for, as I said, their 4th consecutive win.
Hasn't happened yet this
let's
year.
go,
It
Preds.
has not.
Let's
It
go.
has not happened. But
You know
the
who
team-
picked them in silly underdog? I mean, not silly underdogs, but pick
take to the bank.
Picked to
Just
beat
take
the
it back.
Wild. Yeah.
Me, this
Yeah.
kid right here.
Had faith in the boys.
Exactly.
We crowned a college football national champion last night. Congratulations to the Ohio State Buckeyes. They defeat Notre Dame 34-23 in the national title game. I'll be honest with you, when it got to 21-0 late,
21-7.
Sorry, 21-7.
And then 31-7 eventually.
Yes, when it was 21-7, I said, yeah, I think that's about it for Notre Dame. And although they scored a late touchdown, a couple of late touchdowns to at least make it interesting, the game was really in hand for Ohio State.
I thought though there was one moment if they were one stop away from having a legit shot of coming down to tie the game, which is you would have signed up for that at 31-7.
Yeah.
Because at the time you're thinking it's over. This is a blowout, but they did an admirable job. I thought it was an interesting scenario on that, D. Mason. You texted immediately because I was talking with the people I was watching the game with, and I was saying before, and I was like, they have got to take the shot because Notre Dame is daring them to throw. And I was wondering if Ohio State. So, Adam, if you tuned out, I don't know if you did or not, but
I admittedly did.
yeah,
at
I think
halftime.
so it's 31-7. They get it to 31-23. And in the midst of that, they mysteriously tried for a field goal, which made no sense at all, and they missed it anyway. And it wouldn't have helped them that much.
I get
They
why
recover from that.
I get why he did it, because you go down there, and if you go for it and don't get it, now you go down there without points, and now the team seems completely defeated. So you kick the field goal. At least now we're still in a position. It's going to still take 2 scores.
The math still wasn't
but
good,
we're still
though.
in a position to try to win the game or try to tie it.
They got ripped on Twitter for that decision, and they missed it anyway. But
Yeah,
they still came back after that, score, get a 2. So they're within 8. Ohio State has the ball, and they're in that nebulous 4-minute drill where they need a first down or 2 to put the game away. But they get him in a 3rd and long. 1 timeout left for Notre Dame. So I'm thinking, is Ohio State going to go with the play not to lose, run it again, have Notre Dame take their final timeout, where Notre Dame would get the ball back with over 2 minutes to go, and the 2-minute warning, which is new. I'm thinking, okay, Notre Dame's got momentum. They got a shot. So what did they do, Derek? They dared them to throw it. They said, you're not going to run it here for a first down. You won't throw it. I dare you. You won't throw it. And what'd they do? They threw it.
And it's not that they threw it, because, I mean, listen, if you're going to be in a situation like that, okay. It's the fact that Notre Dame, 3rd and 10, you send and you got 3 guys that seem to be first rounders. Tate, obviously Smith, and then the other kid. All 3 of those guys, all 3 of those guys project to be number 1 picks. All of them.
They're good.
And you go straight man-to-man zero coverage. And as a quarterback, the first thing I'm going to do is look to my right. My best player, the best player in the building.
Yes.
You got him one-on-one? Oh, and it's not that they had him one-on-one. The corner was sitting 10 yards off, 8 yards inside,
There's
That
all
was
kinds of
an
room. Yeah.
easy throw. That was one of the only thing could have happened was he overshot it. That is the only thing, because either way, I believe it would have been a pass interference because the defensive back would have panicked,
Yeah.
or it's going to be a touchdown.
There's so much green
You
around.
got besides Travis Hunter, that kid Jeremiah Smith, he is a complete dog, and
He is good.
you 1-on-1. I couldn't believe and it wasn't your best corner covering him.
No, it wasn't. That guy had struggled throughout the night. And so
He deserved
it's
every
like-
backlash he's going to
Yep.
get, Marcus Freeman. He deserved for that one. You didn't even give your kids an opportunity to win that game on that play. You didn't.
it was as if Marcus Freeman said, "You won't do it. I dare you. I'm going to give it to you, but you're going to choke or you won't do it. You're going to run it because you don't have the guts to throw it."
Even if I'm in a run play, I'm checking out.
Yeah.
I see that across the board. I'm checking out, and I'm going to the best player on the field. And what did he
Yeah.
do? He caught it. It should have been a touchdown.
It wasn't. It was an easy.
Exactly.
He caught it
pitch and
easily.
catch. Yeah.
He threw it way up in the air. Just let him run under it. That was the play of the game, though. That put the game away.
Man,
But it became a pretty interesting game
It did.
when it did look like in the final minutes of the first half, they scored a third touchdown on 3 drives. They had the ball 3 times in the first half, scored a touchdown on all 3, get the kickoff to start the second half and get a huge run, cash that in. You're like, woof.
Like it's over.
That's about as
I
perfect.
almost turned it off.
That's about a perfect offensive performance.
Yeah.
Right there to that
I
point.
almost turned it off, and I'm like,
Yeah.
they're still within sort of that strike. If they can get a score, they'll be all right. And lo and behold, they get a score. And then how about their interview of Marcus Freeman? And he said, listen, we just need a turnover right here.
Yeah.
We need a fumble. And then the very next play, he gets a fumble.
But right after, it was the classic announcer jinx, too, because Chris Fowler said, Ohio State's only fumbled it X amount of times, like 4 times the whole year. Next play, boom,
out.
strip.
Abuka. Was
Yeah.
it Abuka?
Yeah, and he was really making a great play.
Exactly. He had made a couple of moves getting up the field, just left the ball exposed somewhat. So, but it was a good game, man. I think if you would have, caught it at the beginning, and you looked at the game and the way it was going by halftime, you probably was like, yeah, this, and then after the big long run to start off the third quarter, you'd have been like, yeah, this game was over. Because I was almost to that point. I'm like, and I was like, let me leave it on and see what happened.
So to take you behind the curtain, the 3 of us and our producer, David James, have a group text where we plan our shows and talk about other things. So that opening drive, Riley Leonard, basically by himself, drives them up the field for a touchdown.
An 18-play drive in which he ran the ball 9 times.
9 times?
Yes.
To get your
9 times.
To get your Ferris Bueller reference in for the day.
And he got hit more than 9 times. Like he was taking a beating on that drive.
Right. So Molly McGrath has a report, which was then tweeted by Matt Fortuna, I believe of The Athletic. And Matt Fortuna said, quote, Riley Leonard immediately ran to the sideline, threw up, and stumbled to the bench area per Molly McGrath, to which Willie responded, you love when people throw up at him.
You seem to like the reference.
To which Derek said, you're not a gamer if you don't puke and rally, which I completely agree with. It started in the game, in the Arizona State-Texas game, when Cam Scatterbo vomited profusely. That's how it was described. Profusely vomited on the sideline.
And then the North Texas quarterback in your silly underdog finale, he threw up and kept going.
Hey, man, if
there was a lot of vomiting this bowl season.
I don't know what you ain't a gamer if you're not vomiting. You're not a gamer.
Yeah.
I'm testing you. I'm testing your gamerhood.
You're not a dog if you don't vomit.
Yeah, that's just.
I think Riley Leonard, he was caught. He was captured on video telling a teammate he fell on the ball. I think it caused him to do it. I don't think it was. I thought it was maybe the physical beating he was taking. It was taking it out of him because there was a lot of quarterback runs. But I think on the last one or the second to last one, he got tackled hard on the ball.
Yeah.
And he started feeling it. And he's like, I just need to get this out of my system. Fortunately, that was not caught on tape.
Yeah.
No, it was not. None of the vomiting profusely was caught on tape.
Well, no, Scatterbo, they caught him a little bit, didn't they?
I'm not
I
sure.
thought they caught him a little bit in the trash can.
Occasionally it does happen.
Yeah.
That was the theme of bowl season.
Yeah.
Just vomiting. That was the Pop-Tarts and
mayo.
Yeah. I can see why people are throwing out.
Cheez-Its and citrus.
Yeah. Oh.
No, my favorite moment of bowl season was the near fight that we had in the Citrus Bowl between Shane Beamer and Brett Bielema. That to me that was the highlight of
peak college football right there.
I would have loved for that one to go down in the middle of the field.
Those some pretty crazy moments in the Vanderbilt Georgia Tech downpour where there was almost a fight. There was some pretty crazy stuff going on there too.
Yeah,
just extreme hold me back, bro energy between Brett Bielema and Shane Beamer.
Man, that was something.
But the Citrus Bowl was just fantastic because someone got married by a person in a Cheez-It costume, and the Cheez-It was wearing stunner shades. Like it was, who knows? But
it reminded me of King Kong Bundy and Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Now you're speaking my language. Now you're speaking my language. Speaking of speaking Derek Mason's language, the Tennessee Titans have reportedly made an addition to their coaching staff.
Yes.
John Bones Fossil. Now, is his nickname Bones because his last name is Fossil? Bones Fossil.
Yeah. And then he's a thin cat.
A little paleontology humor for those of you out there. Bones Fossil. That's where my mind went. But John Fossil has been reportedly hired by the Tennessee Titans as their special teams coordinator. Now, I've seen conflicting reports about the status of Colt Anderson, who was the special teams coordinator this past season. I've seen some reports suggest he's out. I've seen others suggest that they're still sort of figuring out what to do with Colt Anderson, whether he's still on the staff at all, or maybe he's being demoted to another position. But Derek, you worked with John Fossil, his first stop in the NFL, all the way back in 2005. For 3 seasons, he worked as an assistant special teams coach with the Baltimore Ravens when you happened to be there. And when we shared this news on that group chat we were discussing earlier, you were quite excited about the Titans hiring John Fossil just because of your experience working with him. So why don't you tell our fine listeners about John Bones Fossil and what they can expect?
Listen, he's a grinder. That's what I saw, because he worked a lot with the special teams unit. And he did some other stuff with the offense because his dad was the offensive coordinator while I was there as well.
His dad, Jim Fossil. Most notably, the coach of the Giants at one point.
So his dad was the
I was going to
OC.
ask that question. I thought that was the case.
Yeah.
But
his dad was the OC, and he was there as well. But he's a grinder, man. He's all about ball. Every time you saw him, he was, helping out with the special teams unit or helping out with the scout team. I'm sure after that, extensive work in the film room in regards to, his specialty, he's been able to carve out a niche for himself in this league as a special teams coach, a damn good special teams coach at that. So I think they're getting that. And what I do remember, he was high energy. He was very energetic. So they're going to be getting a high energy, not this character person, but just person in general. A guy that's going to grind, a guy that's going to try to get the best out of his players. So that's what you're going to get. His dad was a good coach in his league. Got to know his dad some, and he's just like his father in a sense. So I think this was a good hire for the Titans. Now, what they're going to do with Colt Anderson, I don't know, because they already have an assistant special teams coach, but that doesn't mean Colt Anderson can't, be sort of designated to another position. I've seen that happen several times. Alan Lowry started off as my wide receiver coach and just became predominantly the special teams coach after a while. So you see that within the building where guys 1 year they'll be coaching linebackers and another year they're at a different position. And I think when you're able to be that diverse, I think it helps your coaching career. And again, I think they're getting a really good coach, a really good person, but a really good coach, and Coach Fossil.
So John Bones Fossil, here's his resume. Spent the past 5 seasons with the Dallas Cowboys. This will be his 5th stop in the NFL. He worked for the Ravens with Derek, the Raiders, the Rams, and the Cowboys. So my question for you, Willie, is, and this is something I think we're going to discuss as the show goes on. One thing about Brian Callahan's coaching staff this past season was, outside of his father, the offensive line coach, there was no experience at the major coaching positions.
The
Brian-
coordinators,
Yes.
yeah.
Brian Callahan, of course, was a first-time head coach, a first-time play caller. Nick Holtz was a first-time offensive coordinator. Denard Wilson was a first-time defensive coordinator. Colt Anderson was a first-time special teams coordinator. Maybe this is the the conspiracy theorist in me. Maybe I'm listening to Jared a little too much. Do you think that the powers that be, Chad Brinker, Amy Adams Strunk, it would seem to be too soon for Mike Borgonzi to have a say in this. Do you think it was suggested to Brian Callahan that he add some experience to his staff? Or one thing we have noted about Brian Callahan, Willie, that news conference he gave at the end of the season, he took a lot of accountability,
Yes.
but he also showed that he would be willing to make changes if it were for the best interest of the team. Most notably, he mentioned that he loves calling plays, but if it's for the best interest of the team, then he doesn't call the plays. He seemed open-minded. I think that would be the word to describe Brian Callahan. Do you think Brian Callahan thought, okay, I went with an inexperienced staff last season. Perhaps I should add an experienced hand in John Fossil to help me out?
Yeah, this seems to be a very sensible move that I think all of us from afar would have thought would be, number one, he's a very decorated special teams coach that happens to be available. And number two, you had basically the worst special teams in the league for most of the year. It did get modestly better down the stretch, but it was disastrous and put you in a big hole. It's one of the reasons you have the first pick. And so regardless, I would hope that Brian Callahan alone, because what I saw, Adam, was a guy that was willing to look in the mirror, knows he wants to get better. This was his first year in the league. I think it's something that easily he could have looked at and said, this is what we need to do without any twisting of the arm from above. I can't rule it out. I don't know how it went down, but I think it's very plausible that it happened internally without anybody having to say anything. He knew they had the worst special teams. I do think it's an interesting question of what happens to Colt Anderson, because there had to be a reason why Brian Callahan saw him come in. I do think sometimes there is a feeling among the fans, you got to kick the guy to the curb, get him out of here, he's terrible. When in fact, I do think coaches can not be ready to be a coordinator early. He's pretty young. He was a pretty good special teams player, and maybe he wasn't quite ready. But if it doesn't mean you have to necessarily kick him out. Like you said, Derek, you can put him in another role and use his attributes. He learns from the experience, and hopefully he fits a good need on your staff. Rather than to say, we got to exact a pound of flesh. We got to fire 3 guys. We can't come back. We got to show our fans that this is not good enough, and we got to fire guys. I don't know that you have to do that, but you have to make adjustments to make your staff better.
But it's just, and go with me for a quick second, because of sort of this perception of what the Tennessee Titans is in their front office, a bunch of backstabbing, conniving individuals. That's the perception. I'm not saying that it's true, but that is the perception, and they need to clean that perception up very quickly. And winning does that. So either they need to win or find a way from a social media standpoint or whatnot to fix the narrative in regards to the Titans. But it's just ironic that before they hired the GM, there's no coach hirings, no coach firings. The minute they hire a GM, all of a sudden now there's a coach hiring. There's not still not a coach firing. What my theory is, and I haven't talked to anybody or whatnot. I'm just saying, based upon the perception of the Tennessee Titans, how they backstab and do all this other stuff, my thoughts were, they came in and said, listen, you got to fire him or hire someone else. You got one of the two. You got to hire someone else. Needs
that
to be,
absolutely could have.
Yeah,
absolutely could have.
Like either he doesn't need to hold that position on your team. Either you move him around or you get rid of him. But you need another special teams.
I would hope it's not a threat kind of thing. I would hope
I'm not saying they went in like
you know what I mean, like
bullying.
That's
how
we
want
it. Yeah, right. That's what we want to. That's sometimes the more like
The simple way would
provocative way. But I would hope that there was a reasonable conversation. Hey, coach, you know it, I know it. Our special teams were below. It was 32nd out of 30. There's 32 teams in the league. You were 32nd. Okay, depending on what metrics you want to look at, and I think all of them would tell you the same thing. They struggled. So what are we going to do about it? Let's hope they had a reasonable conversation and came up with what looks like on the surface a very good solution.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not saying that
it doesn't have to be all this, infighting. You got to do this or you're gone. But you're not going to tell me who to do.
No, but that is the perception, right?
That is the perception.
That's the perception of the Tennessee Titans front office, that they're a bunch of backstabbing, no good, you know what? That's the perception. I'm not saying that it's true. But so when things
now you're
like
bringing
this,
in the Boganzis.
when things like this happen, you wonder, like, okay, was that a point where Brinker stepped in and said, okay, now you need to hire someone. I'm not telling you need to fire him, but you need to hire someone in his spot. And right away they did it. So take it for what it is. I think they're going to reassign Colton Anderson because you still got to pay him for the next 2 years, I think. Anyway, and he's a young coach. And like you said, Willie, you just don't want a young coach, a first opportunity, just throw him out to the wolves. Like after he didn't do a good job, oh, you're gone. We have no use for you. No, you want to try to find another area within the team that he can work, because
you're paying him anyway.
Exactly. You're paying him anyway. You fire him now. That's a huge indictment on him being ready, because he may have to go. If you fire him now, he may have to go to the NCAA. I mean, he might have to go to a college team in order to get his career jump started again.
615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on the Titans reportedly hiring John Bones Fossil as their new special teams coordinator. As I said before, there are conflicting reports as for what this means for Colt Anderson, the current, or perhaps ex, Titans special team coordinator. A lot of palace intrigue around the Titans. So 615-737-1025. A really interesting behind-the-scenes report on the Titans hiring of new general manager Mike Borgonzi. We'll discuss that next. Before we do, however, tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vanderbilt men's basketball. The Commodores, fresh off their win against Tennessee over the weekend, take on number 4 Alabama on the road with a 6 p.m. tip-off and a pregame show that starts at 5:30. Coverage is also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Vanderbilt men's basketball, presented by Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball, coming to Nashville's Municipal Auditorium February 5th through March 2nd. Go to auprobasketball.com for more details and to purchase tickets.
All right, let's talk Lead Company, proud sponsor Nashville Predators. Here on 102.5 The Game, we've got the Preds and the Sharks tonight. First meeting between the two teams. And it will be the Predators looking for their season-high 4th straight win. So they are seeking that. It'll be brought to you by Lead Company. Our coverage starts at 6 o'clock with Max Hers. And then Pete Weber and Jay Moore will be on the call at 7 o'clock here on The Game. Lead Company, meanwhile, with all these frigid temperatures, I'm sure is making sure everybody has their heating unit working properly. And I salute you if you're fighting through some issues. But Lead Company, they do such a great job every winter going around, taking the phone calls, getting the appointment, 615-567-1000 or leadcompany.com. So if you're having problems with your heater, by all means, reach out to them. But also think long-term. Prevent it from happening again by getting the year-round checkups, or the opposite in the summer when the air conditioning goes on the fritz. If you haven't had it checked in a while, get it checked before the weather gets hot. 615-567-1000 or leadcompany.com. Ask them about their home maintenance plan. Lead Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick. 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Fingan. But you already knew that because I just said all of our names. But this is radio. I'm a professional. We are live at Bridgestone Arena, Predators and Sharks tonight. We'll get into the Predators in a little bit. We mentioned this yesterday. If you're coming to the game tonight, hoping to jeer Yaroslav Askarov, unfortunately, that probably won't happen. The Sharks are playing the second half of a back-to-back. They lost in Boston yesterday. Askarov played yesterday. Therefore, he is not expected to play tonight. But the Sharks and Predators will meet on Thursday at the Shark Tank. And I imagine we'll see Askarov versus Saros then, perhaps.
He has played well. Askarov,
He has.
and they had a lead in Boston after two periods.
It was 3-2, I believe.
They
correct?
played an excellent second period. Boston sort of overwhelmed them in the third. They got a couple of goals. The final score was 6-3. There were two empty netters, so Askarov gave up 4. But his numbers are quite a bit better than his partner, Alexander Georgiev, who would likely get the start tonight.
Yes. So we'll talk more about the Predators in a little bit. The other day, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated had a column looking back at divisional playoff weekend. And buried at the bottom of this column, he had some notes about the Tennessee Titans hiring Mike Borgonzi. And I thought there were some really interesting behind-the-scenes nuggets that we're going to take some time to discuss. So Breer writes, in part, quote, initially, I was like a lot of people looking at the Tennessee opening. With President of Football Operations Chad Brinker in charge and Coach Brian Callahan in place, it was natural to ask whether the position the Titans were hiring into was a quote-unquote real general manager position. The Titans insisted it was. Landing Borgonzi, one of the top GM candidates in the league, seems to prove it. That said, the structure intentionally is a little different than what most NFL teams employ, or a lot different. Callahan will report to Borgonzi, and Borgonzi will report to Brinker in a setup that mirrors what you'd see in other sports. Borgonzi will oversee coaching, scouting, sports medicine, sports performance, and player development, and here's the key part, and have final say on the roster. The idea generally is to allow Borgonzi to focus on building the team and football operation and take some other newer age elements of the job off his plate. So according to Albert Breer, forget the sports medicine, coaching, scouting, sports performance. According to Albert Breer, Borgonzi will have final say on the roster. But I thought that Chad Brinker was the supreme ruler of football. I thought that part really stood out to me, guys, that we have been led to believe, because the powers that be have said as much, that Chad Brinker will have decision-making power. But according to Albert Breer, it appears that Borgonzi will have final say on the roster. What do you make of all of that?
But isn't that the same sort of cut and paste they said about Rand Carthon when they restructured everything and made Brinker the president and all this, whatever he does? And they said those same exact things.
Oh, yeah, they went into great detail.
For Rand Carthon. We're going to remove some things from his plate and let him concentrate solely on
getting the players.
Players. And then come to find out, it seems like what's been sort of trickling out is Rand didn't have no say. That Brinker had all the say anyway. So again, you're doing this, you're trying to, based upon the perception, you're trying to fool us once again. And you think, the fan base is going to buy this once again. But again, listen, they're going to have their press conference. Hopefully in the next day or so, they're going to have their press conference.
I do not believe we have heard official word on when that news conference
exactly.
will be.
So I'm hoping it's this week, which means it's Wednesday or Thursday. So they're going to have, and then everyone's going to have an opportunity to drill them or put their feet to the fire in regards to the true structure and who has the say. And frankly and honest, Willie and Adam, I think they're going to regurgitate the same things they regurgitated about Rand Carthon when those questions was asked when they made the whole switch. They're going to regurgitate some of the same damn answers from that one on this one. So why should we believe them?
Well, they can pretty much say anything they want.
Yeah.
The bottom line is when it is put into practice, will they do what they need to do and build the roster? I'm more curious.
I hope they do.
I'll be quite frank. I am not into trying to dig in and try to figure out the structure of the hierarchy, because as I've said before, once you get working with people, the title doesn't really matter. When you can give anybody virtually any title, just like Adam always jokes about the supreme ruler of football. Like, we could say Adam is the supreme talk show host of the galaxy or something. Like, you could put that on a business card. You can put that on the business cards you want. The bottom line is, how do you do every time you walk in to do your job? How are you interacting with us, your coworkers? Are you effective? Are we effective as a team? I'm not worried about the structure, really. I know there's going to be a million questions about this. I'm not losing sleep over it. I want to see, can they become an efficient office that builds a roster into the type of roster that gives you a chance to win in a very tough AFC. In the next couple of years, like, you can speed up the clock 3 years. I think Joe Burrow, I think Patrick Mahomes, I think Josh Allen.
It only gets better.
I think Lamar Jackson. I think all those guys are still going to be in the mix in the AFC. And C.J. Stroud is going to be moving into his prime. Who knows if Trevor Lawrence is going to figure out stuff? What about Anthony Richardson? It's not going to be easy to win in the AFC. Bo Nix is in there now. So they've got to do some pretty darn good roster building over the next couple of years. It's not what they do next year in my mind. How do you build into a team that can compete with those teams?
But
I don't care who's got what title, who's got what. Just
get
it done.
I know, but
get it done.
The important part of that, however, especially in the roles that we have, when things are going wrong, or when things are going right, though things have been going mostly wrong for the Titans over the past few years, we want someone to blame.
I know, that's the problem.
I know, but
you don't have to listen to those people. You have to know, if you're Amy Adams Strunk, is this working efficiently? How is this working every day?
But because of
right now it's bad because they've been so poor.
But because of their track record, it seems like all the backbiting and no, he did this, no, he did that, he was in control. No. We should care. The fan base should care about the structure because of what happened, with the last two GMs and head coaches.
Well, let's ask that question to our listeners. 615-737-1025. How much do you care about the structure of the Titans front office? So according to Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, Callahan will report to Borgonzi. No surprise there. Borgonzi will report to Brinker. Again, no surprise there. According to Albert Breer, Borgonzi will oversee coaching, scouting, sports medicine, sports performance, and player development, and have final say on the roster. Those two words, final say. I feel like we've been saying those words quite a bit.
So why do they have Brinker?
Years.
Why is Brinker even employed?
That's another question. But I would want to hear from you. How much do you, as a Titans fan, really care about the structure of the front office? Because we do spend a lot of time talking about it, but I would love to hear from you. 615-737-1025. We'll take your calls and your texts on this. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time now. If you set out to lose some weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a goal to shed some extra pounds only to come up short. But I got a solution for you. And the solution is my good friends over at Cool Springs MD and Dr. Lodge and his team, because they understand the frustration of this cycle. And that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Our question for you at 615-737-1025. How much do you truly care about the structure of the Titans front office? Because we've spent a lot of time over these past few years talking about it. We're going to continue to reference Albert Breer's story in Sports Illustrated. There were some other nuggets in there that I would love to get to. But Trey is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHonda.com. Trey, thank you for calling, my friend. Please go ahead.
Hey, how y'all doing today, guys?
Good, thanks.
Hey, I think that it's extremely important to know who's doing what and who's saying what and who's executing what and who's due diligent doing their job. Yes, of course. Every aspect of life, you have an echelon of people that have different responsibilities. And I think it's a catastrophe that we have to investigate them to find out what the hell they're doing over there. It's a shame.
Investigate. I would love to hire Trey as our chief investigator.
I'm getting ready to divorce them. But I love you guys, and y'all have a good day, okay?
You too, Trey.
Wait, hold on,
Oh,
Trey.
Trey
we
left. Trey's
want
gone,
to hire you.
unfortunately.
Okay, it's too bad. I think I nominate Trey
As our PI, as our
yeah,
private
as
investigator.
the official private investigator for DVD. I want an investigation.
We need to get that one shot of him with the magnifying glass looking at it and his eye gets really big like they used to see in all the TV shows.
Yes. Yeah, Magnum PI. There you go.
Yeah.
Nice timing, David.
So some other texts on this topic. One texter says, I care a lot about structure. Even though the front office goes mostly unseen, it is the foundation of the franchise. These are the people that are responsible for assembling the team. You can have the best coach in the world, but even they won't be able to coach terrible players to a championship. Another texter says the front office doesn't matter. The product they put on the field is what counts. I don't go to games to see any front office people. They can have Gumby in the front office as long as they are winning. I wouldn't care. I would nominate. I would nominate Pokey instead of Gumby for those of you who watch.
Well,
Gumby,
if you don't have a good front office,
you ain't
going to win. So you can't winning and having a bad front office don't go together.
Right.
They just don't. So
let's clarify.
Yes.
When I am
Yes.
saying I'm not worried about who does what necessarily, I'm saying that from afar. I understand it's very important
exactly.
for these people to be on the same page, but I'm not going to lose any, I'm not going to do the investigation. To me, it is up to them. It's like football recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
For years and years, sports talk shows, you could make a lot of money. You could have a lot of followers if you were really into the recruiting scene. And comparing a guy's 40 time like Derek Mason in the 90s, coming out of it. We got this kid, Derek Mason. He's out of Michigan. He runs up 4.5, and comparing him to Willie Donick down in Orlando. I heard he's really good. That for years, that was it. That was not compelling to me, but that doesn't mean I don't think recruiting is important. Right. It's like, do you really want to know how the sausage is made, or do you just like to enjoy when you go to a Brewers game, when you get a brat, right? Hey, that tastes really good. That's my point. It's up to that. They've got to be on the same page. It's essentially important. I'm just saying, as a person who follows the team, I'm not going to become the PI, Magnum PI, trying to be, who has the final say? Are you working well today? Like, that's other people's responsibility. I'm into a stat that Hal Gill likes to point out there in hockey. I like to throw all the numbers at him like you do, the analytics and stuff, the expected goals, and he just nods his head. He goes, what is the get it donativity? He goes, that's the stat I care about. Get it donativity.
Is that a stat?
It's a Hal Gill stat. Get it donativity.
Like it.
What's the result?
It's the ex-professional athlete's favorite.
Yeah.
As you can attest
You need to be in the 90 percentile.
Yes.
as you can attest to. But there was another text here that I thought, got to the heart of the matter, not the one about Gumby, although I do appreciate a Gumby reference in the year 2025.
Eddie Murphy.
I wasn't even thinking about Eddie Murphy as Gumby. I was thinking about the actual Gumby, but that is a good point. Benjamin says, I care because the structure of the front office caused the rift between Vrabel. Also, stability is key in the NFL. It's hard to build momentum from season to season when the fan base, staff, and players do not know who is in charge.
And listen, it worked so well. Now, we all, know the story of Floyd and Jeff. But when it was working, it was working, and it showed in the front office and it showed on the field. When John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, when it seemed like they were hip to hip, it was working in the front office and on the football field. And in both situations, when it started to fray, what happened to the team after that? The team started to decline. That's why I said, there should be, based upon what has happened in two situations, the fans should care about how their front office is ran. Because if you go to all of the winning organizations, there's a clear distinction between each individual and what their jobs are.
Got to know your role.
Exactly. Know your role and
Shut
know
your
it
mouth.
well. Know your role. It's just like we were told for the quarterback. Be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there for the quarterback. That's all that matters. And catch the football. That's all that matters. You do that, you gain trust from the quarterback. You don't do that, you don't have any trust. So again, Titans, if you don't structure this and get this back to where it once was, the fan base isn't going to be with you. If they don't see a clear distinction in everybody's title and hear it and then start seeing it implemented, they're not going to be in this with you. I wonder if they understand that, or they're just oblivious to what's going on. They're like, listen, we're going to do what we need to do. And, they'll like it once we start winning. But what if you don't start winning? Then what happens?
The fact that this team has not won in the past 2+ years, going back to the end of the 2022 season when they lost, 7 in a row to end the season. This team has been doing a lot of losing lately. So to your point, Derek, things that fans normally wouldn't care about are important to fans now. If this team was the Chiefs or the Bills or the Commanders or the Eagles or whomever, the structure of the front office, as I've said a couple of times, the palace intrigue, who is making the decisions, who has final say, there are fans, diehard fans, regardless of what a team's situation is, who eat that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, most fans probably of winning organizations don't really worry about that too much. The fact that the Titans have been arguably the worst team in the NFL over the past 2.5 years, you could certainly make that case by the win and loss record or the number of GMs and coaches that they've had. This stuff bubbles up to the surface. This matters a lot more to fans than it would under normal circumstances. As you said, when the Titans were winning and they were the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs, I don't think anybody cared about, did John Robinson want this player or did Mike Vrabel want this player?
They didn't care.
They didn't care because they were winning.
That's a fair point. I think we're much more worried about it when it seems dysfunctional.
Right. Fans are looking for someone to blame for all of this. And Rand Carthon was the scapegoat. He was the one fired.
Mm-hmm.
But Chad Brinker, we're curious about how Chad Brinker has ascended from assistant GM to supreme ruler of football in what seems to be record time. We're going to learn more about Mike Borgonzi in the coming days and weeks and months and hopefully years, because we're hoping that the Titans don't fire another general manager after 2 seasons. But, it also comes down to the owner, the owner not being around, not being available. There is a lot of uncertainty around this organization. And when you mix that all together, it leads people to care about what would normally be the minutia that only diehard fans would really care about.
I wonder if, and I'm not saying this is true, but I wonder, because we saw so much of Amy early on, and she made herself.
I do have some news. I do have some news.
Okay.
The Titans will make President of Football Operations Chad Brinker available to the media tomorrow at 10 a.m.
I said
Oh, boy.
Wednesday or
10
Thursday.
a.m. Mike Borgonzi will be available tomorrow at 11. So I imagine we'll come on the air and we'll.
Oh,
we-
whoa.
So it's
Yeah.
not jointly. That's
So
interesting.
both of them are not doing it together?
Correct.
Interesting.
Brinker will
That is
speak at.
very interesting.
Everybody's going to be comparing answers to
Yes.
the same questions.
Brinker will speak tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mike Borgonzi will speak tomorrow at 11. So as it relates to Borgonzi, I imagine we will come on the air and immediately throw to Mike Borgonzi's news conference. We will carry that live. But Chad Brinker will speak at 10 tomorrow, Borgonzi at 11.
Hey, fellas.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is the suit. I have to chime in for a second. You're missing a key part to this Chad Brinker thing.
What's that?
Quotes only. It's not audio, not video. Doesn't sound like it's an actual full-on press conference.
Interesting.
Oh,
So
Interesting.
For
I-
that is for Brinker and not Borgonzi?
that is for Brinker, and then Borgonzi a full-on press conference at 11. That's
So
how
he
I
won't-
read the email.
So
Okay, I
based
did not
upon
see
you
the
read
email.
based upon the email, is he taking questions?
I guess he's taking questions,
But
but
there'll be no audio or video of it.
yeah. That's how. That's yeah.
What do you think about that? I
So
don't-
the
that seems-
reporters, they
that-
can't bring their own audio, or they can.
Well, they'll be
No,
they'll be
but I
recording
mean-
it and
Yeah, record.
transcribing
Yeah,
it.
Right.
that's what I'm saying.
But there will not be a live
Oh,
feed.
for everyone to
Right.
hear it.
Chase
actually.
and Big Joe will not be able to hold Chad Brinker's news conference
Yes.
Correct.
on their show because it's not really a news conference in the traditional sense.
We'll have to sit there and read Twitter, essentially.
Oh wow.
which
but
is a big part of the job anyway.
But it seems like they're not doing that with Borgonzi.
No, Borgonzi will have a traditional news conference.
Correct.
That we will carry live.
Now I wonder if Brinker will be a part of that.
That's a good question. Thanks for the update,
And,
Chad.
Yeah.
and really, is this the trend setting, or is this what they would like to have be the structure? That Borgonzi will be the out front in front of the media, how much to be determined, and Chad Brinker will remain more of the behind the scenes. Because I do think in the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick one voice,
Mhm.
too many people doing too many press conferences can get you in trouble if you're not on the same page.
But here's the thing that I don't understand, and I'll get back to my point I was going to make.
Why
about
don't you
this
hold
thing.
that thought
Okay. All right.
till we get back? 615-737-1025. So Chad Brinker will address reporters at 10 o'clock, although there will be no live feed of this. So only the reporters in the room will ask questions and we'll have to wait for their stories and their tweets. And then Mike Borgonzi will address reporters in a traditional news conference at 11. We'll get to Derek Stock coming up next. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you inside Bridgestone Arena, which is so cold my hands are turning red. It is freezing in here, more so than usual because it's also freezing outside. Predators, Sharks tonight to wrap up this homestand. Predators going for their 4th consecutive win. We'll talk some Predators later in the program. But as we were going to break, it was announced that Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi will address reporters tomorrow at St. Thomas Sports Park. Mike Borgonzi will speak at 11 o'clock. So we will carry that news conference live right off the jump tomorrow on the show. But this is what I thought was interesting about Chad Brinker's media availability. Jared sent me this email. Quote, it will be a 4-quote only session. No video or audio for air/posting. So this goes back to what we were talking about with, the structure of the organization and needing to hear from the powers that be. One disadvantage I think this gives the Titans, and Willie, I was just using this example right before we came back. Ran Carthon did an interview with the Tennessean right after the Titans were demolished by the Detroit Lions during the season. And Derek, you can speak to this. How much time did you specifically, with Jared and Chris on the award-winning pregame show, nitpick at every single word that Ran Carthon said in this interview? We never heard the audio. It was only the interview. And the disadvantage that puts Ran Carthon in at that time is we don't know the tone of how he said those things. So they look, they look worse. They looked worse in print than they might have been if we had actually heard how he said it. And I'm wondering if that's what's going to happen here with Chad Brinker holding I wouldn't even call it a news conference because I guess and that was the thing I asked Jared. I said, well, could Teron Davenport record it and then give us the audio and we could play it on the air? No, that's not allowed. So maybe this is just me worrying about this, wondering about this. But if we're looking to hear what Chad Brinker has to say, and I think we all want to hear what he has to say, I'm not sure this was the right way to go about it. But Derek, you had a point you wanted to make before we went to break.
Yeah, it's in that regard, we should be able to hear it unfiltered. We should be able to hear it live and as it's going on. You're asking, and again, I'm gonna go back to this, and it has nothing to do with anything on the football field. You're asking all these people to buy those extremely expensive seats in that new stadium, but you want to allow them to sort of hear what your whoever he is, I don't know what he is, GM, president of the president, supreme ruler of all football and the president. I don't know what he is, but you want to allow your fan base, who you're asking for all this money, you don't allow him to hear it as it's actually going. That doesn't sit well with me as a individual that has followed this team, that loves this team, that enjoys seeing this team succeed. But to go back to what I was going to say before we had to go to break, this whole new setup, it's just weird from this standpoint. One, I'm trying to figure out like what is Brinker's job? What is he supposed to do? Like, okay, he says he doesn't have the final say. Borgonzi has that, so he better watch his back. Because if he don't have final say, Borgonzi does, then Chad, you may be the next guy out. He may stab you in the back. Like it's assumed that you did that to Ran. People are assuming that. I'm not saying that it's true, but the optics look that way. But again, I'm trying to figure out what Brinker does, because when it was John Robinson, when the team spoke, it was John Robinson speaking. It wasn't somebody ahead of John Robinson saying this. It wasn't, all this other stuff going on. It was Mike Vrabel and John Robinson. Those two guys were working in tandem. And even when they hired Ran Carthon, it was Ran Carthon and Mike Vrabel. Now, For whatever reason, it didn't work out. But it was Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon. And then somehow, some way, Chad was able to supersede or jump over everybody and become that one guy. Now it's Chad Brinkert, Borgonzi, and then the head coach.
I would.
That is, and listen, maybe they want to. I guess it's the season of breaking norms now. I guess they want to break the norm and not have, the traditional head coach, GM, and then, that really the owner.
And we'll talk. You bring that up. There is more in this Albert Breer story for Sports Illustrated that gets into this that I want to discuss. But Willie, you go ahead.
I think
that just seems kind of. That doesn't. It just seems kind of. Not right in a sense to me. Like what is his job again?
What is it you say you do
Exactly.
here?
Yeah. Well, it's the
Bobs.
We're not reinventing the wheel. These are people coming together to try to put together a good football roster.
Exactly.
Let's not forget that. I would think that if you're going to be working together, then you could do a joint press conference because nobody's really heard from either one of them very much, Brinker or Borgonzi. Obviously, it's Borgonzi's big moment, I'm sure, with his family and everything. That's probably why they want to give him center stage with this and make it more of his day. But that's unfortunately not the state of affairs with the team. And a funny example, Adam, of what you're talking about, where you run the risk of when it's only in print and people only read and they can't hear your tone and they can't hear your empathy. They can't hear your voice inflection.
Yes.
You can get yourself in trouble. Just like I think we've all sent a text that's been misinterpreted or received a text where you look and you're like, wait.
Oh, happens all the time.
Is she really mad or is she being sarcastic? You can't tell.
That was my dating life in high school.
Yeah, you can't tell.
What about that emoji? She didn't use it. She didn't use an emoji. That was always me in high school. It's like she said this nice thing, but there was no emoji. There was a period at the end. Is she mad?
So there's
no kissy face at the end of this.
Right.
What happened?
And so it also was old school too. There are books of quotes.
Yes.
Funny books, and you'll laugh at all of them. One of them, an announcer said, Adam, let's say the pitcher's name is Adam Vingan. Adam, you'll appreciate this, Adam. Adam Vingan is throwing up in the bullpen. So if you read that sentence in the words, it's funny because like he's throwing up in the bullpen.
Yeah.
But he was saying, no, he's throwing up in the bullpen. You know what I mean? Like the bullpen's up here. He's throwing up there.
Yeah.
He's throwing up in the bullpen. But it comes out, you read it, Adam Vingan is throwing up in the bullpen.
I mean,
wait a minute. So if you're listening on the radio, you're like, what is he talking about? Or if you read that sentence in a book of funny quotes,
the pitching coach is
everybody
covered
laughs.
in vomit.
It paints a picture.
There we go.
Things can get misinterpreted is my
Yes,
point.
and that's what I'm wondering about tomorrow because we will be monitoring social media because tweeting is allowed at this Chad Brinker quote-unquote news conference. So we will be reading those tweets and we will certainly be discussing those tweets in addition to hearing what Mike Borgonzi has to say. I do find it interesting that they're not doing it together. The first thing that popped into my mind was when the Predators fired Peter Laviolette. They held a news conference the following day to introduce John Hines, who was coaching that evening. They did it in two separate news conferences. David Poyle addressed reporters first to answer questions about the decision to fire Peter Laviolette, and then they brought in John Hines to answer questions about becoming Predators coach and all of those things. So perhaps there's an element of that. Like, get the questions you want for Brinker so that when Borgonzi is up there, you're only asking questions to Borgonzi. So he's not just sitting there. There could be an element of that.
There could be.
But I'm wondering about why it's not going to be a traditional news conference. But I did see a tweet talking about the structure of the front office. I mean, a text, I should say, about the structure of the front office and, about people caring. And I thought this was a good one, Willie. I think you'll appreciate this. You are a movie buff, a television buff. The texter said the NFL is show business. And just like with movies, if you know the director and producers are bad, do you really want to see their movies? Fair point.
I look at it the other way sometimes. If I know somebody who is a decorated director or producer did the movie, I'm more inclined to give that movie a chance.
Right, like if it's Martin Scorsese.
Right,
you're
like, it's the latest from Scorsese. Okay, I'll check it out. Yeah.
See, y'all different from me. I watch just about anything. I give anything a chance. And when it comes to movies, I will sit through an awful movie because I know I'm looking for that one thing that's going to be like, oh yes, it's that one thing within the movie.
I mean,
that
don't get me
always
wrong.
gets you.
I do love a bad movie. I do love a
Awesomely bad.
awesomely
Exactly.
bad movie. Here's an awesomely bad movie that I stumbled across the other day. Undercover Brother. Do you remember that?
Yes, it was awfully good.
Yeah, so bad it's good.
It was good.
Oh,
I
man.
enjoyed it.
No, those are fun movies.
Eddie Griffith.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was anyway.
Um,
Point being, anyway, I've lost my train of thought because now I'm thinking about Undercover Brother.
listen, I go back to
The texter's text.
I go
yeah,
back to
about the-
Yes.
the structure, and again, ultimately, we can't lose sight of Rand Carthon famously saying, make the main thing the main thing. The main thing is football. The main thing is putting a winning product on the field. So listen, if you're able to do that, if you want to have the seven dwarfs, run your, have a
behind
part
the
of,
scenes,
yeah, behind
sleepy,
the scenes working it
grumpy.
or whatnot. If it works, okay, I get it. You wanted to change how things were ran. You wanted to be, forward thinking. I'm all with, progressive thinking and whatnot and trying to make things better. I'm all for that. But, with the history that this team has had, I'm talking about the recent history. I'm not even going back to Floyd and Jeff. The recent history they've had suggests that, there will be some backstabbing going on ultimately.
Maybe even some front stabbing.
Yeah, some front stabbing too.
Can there be side stabbing?
Only on special occasions.
I mean,
Only on
theoretically,
special occasions.
theoretically, yes,
Only on special occasions.
there can be side stabbing.
But I ultimately, I just want it to work. I just want the Titans. And listen, if it happens quickly, that's great. I do hope that they show some progress, but what does some progress mean to the head coach? Does, winning 5-6 games show improvement in their eyes? I think that's what he needs to understand. And I'm sure they've explained it to him what they will classify as a good season to them. But I just want it to work. But, judging by what has happened the last few times, like if you don't give this fan base, something concrete, something that they can look forward to, then I'm not sure you're going to get this team back if you start losing. I'm not sure if you're going to get this fan base back the way it once was if you start off losing.
I'll make a quick point, and that is, I know how our media works here. I do think there will be a lot. I just hope we don't get too much into the gotcha of what Brinker says and then what Broganzi says. And if something doesn't quite look like it makes sense, there you go. They're not on the same page.
But why do we do that? Why do they?
Because you don't get the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
They're not getting. So I worry that we're going to get too much into the twisting around of words. But to me, what I really want to hear, I do want to hear what is their reasonable expectation of next year. Will they use the word rebuild, or will they say, "Look, I don't have expectations. Try not to get." I do wonder how they're going to approach that question, because to me, that's an important thing. Are you trying to win next year? Because they kind of confused people. They kind of gave people an impression they thought they might be able to win last year. And I don't know that that was the right way to go. But now they have a chance, especially knowing what they know about Levis, to say this is a clean slate. We're starting over. And I'm not sure what they expect. I just want to see how they answer those questions.
And then my rebuttal to that would be, well, why wasn't it a rebuild last year? Because
they have to answer for that.
Yeah.
At least Brinker should. Borgonzi doesn't have to answer that.
Exactly.
Brinker does.
Brinker does. So why now all of a sudden it's a rebuild this year, but last year with a unknown quarterback and a bunch of holes across the roster, it wasn't a rebuild last year?
Yeah, that is a good question. And it does give me the idea to ask all of you at 615-737-1025. You can call or text on our phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. what is, if you had the opportunity to ask Chad Brinker and or Mike Borgonzi a question at tomorrow's news conference / whatever the Chad Brinker thing is, what would you want to know? And be realistic. Don't say, did you read Chad Brinker in the back? It was you. Don't do that, because he's not going to answer that.
Did you issue the code red?
Yes.
Oh man, I'm sure.
But I would love to know what our listeners would ask
Yeah.
Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi if given the opportunity. Call us, text us 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D Mace, Vingan, and Donick 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan attempting to not turn into an icicle in here inside Bridgestone Arena, Predators and Sharks tonight. So my question to all of you at 615-737-1025, you have the opportunity to ask Mike Borgonzi or Chad Brinker a question at their news conferences tomorrow. Again, Chad Brinker will address reporters at 10 o'clock, although it will not be a traditional news conference. We won't be able to play the audio for you. Mike Borgonzi will address reporters at a traditional news conference at 11 o'clock, which we will carry for you live. You have the opportunity to attend one of these news conferences. You have an opportunity to ask a question. What do you want to know? 615-737-1025. We'll start with Jerry on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jerry, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, guys. If you could label the Titans, would they be Dr. Jekyll? Would they be Pinky and the Brain? Or would they be Dr. Frankenstein? And the question to Chad Brinker was, do you have a definite solution, or are you just picking time until you find the right solution?
Thanks for the call, Jerry. So I didn't understand the first part.
I did.
Okay.
He said, I think what he's saying is management. Would you, look at them and say they are these characters? And if you've watched these characters, these cartoons,
well, Pinky and the Brain is right in my wheelhouse.
I've seen a few
So
episodes.
I would say they are more Pinky and the Brain.
Shout out
than anything.
Animaniacs.
And I think in this situation, it seems like, I'm not saying that it is, but it seems like that the owner is Pinky and Brinker is the Brain, because he's found a way to finagle himself all the way up to the supreme ruler of all football. He's convinced, Pinky, that what he's doing is the right thing ultimately to take over the football world.
So you know how the song goes. The Pinky and the Brain.
The
Pinky
Brinker
and the Brain. Brinker and the
the Amy and the Brain.
One is a genius, the other's insane. So I'm not sure Amy Adams Strunk would want to be labeled as insane.
Willie's like, I'm not touching that.
Hey, Animaniacs, man, that's right in my wheelhouse.
I love Pinky and the Brain.
That's some good stuff. Okay. Chris in Dixon on our text line says, question for Borgonzi. With Chad Brinker reportedly having the final say on decisions, how much autonomy will you have as GM to shape the roster and make key calls? And how do you see your role fitting within the structure? Again, a question about the decision-making power.
So, and what would be the number one thing, the first priority of this new system? Because we have a texter on who texted me, and not the actual text line, and it's a good text. Who determines the plan for the first overall pick? That is job one. That's what you have to figure out before you do anything else. And so that's what's going to put this whole structure to the test. And do you have an idea what you want to do right now? Or I don't think you should have to answer that question today, but you should probably have your game plan of how you're going to go about what you will do with that first pick. Now,
in that, from what Albert Breer is saying,
yes,
Borgonzi would have the last say in the roster.
Referencing Albert Breer's story on SportsIllustrated.com. Let me scroll back up because I just left it. Okay. This was Breer. Quote, the structure intentionally is a little different than what most NFL teams employ, or a lot different. Callahan will report to Borgonzi, and Borgonzi will report to Brinker, in a setup that mirrors what you'd see in other sports. Borgonzi will oversee coaching, scouting, sports medicine, sports performance, and player development, and have final say on the roster. The idea generally is to allow Borgonzi to focus on building the team and football operation and take some other newer age elements of the job off his plate. That's part of the report.
So again, if I'm hearing right, Borgonzi has last say.
Well, this is the question I think this is the question I think Jared asked yesterday. Let's use the number one pick as an example. Let's say Mike Borgonzi loves Travis Hunter. Is in love with Travis Hunter, and he wants to pick Travis Hunter with the number one overall pick. Does Chad Brinker get to say, that's great, Mike, but I like Cam Ward? So
or Brinker says, look, that's fine. I like Travis Hunter too. but we have got to get more picks. My analytics people are telling me we need more picks. We've got to trade down and get as many picks as we can. So if you can do that and get Travis Hunter, great. But I'm telling you, we're not just going to take Travis Hunter with the first pick. These are the kind of discussions I'm sure
Right.
they will have to think tank and come up with their philosophy.
So in the ultimate question, a lot of Titans fans
if
want to
they
know
can't
is
agree, who is the tiebreaker, right?
exactly.
But that's always been
Yeah.
the case when you have a structure.
But we
like
were
that.
told that Chad Brinker is going to be the tiebreaker.
But now
but you would
it's-
think
it's
Borgonzi is going to be the
Borgonzi,
guy on the
right?
phone, right? There's got to be the guy on the phone that
Right.
you're calling. Who's the main contact? If other teams, Adam, let's say you're the Giants and Derek, you're the Raiders. There are going to be some conversations between the Titans and those two teams. Who do they call? Are they calling Brinker? Or are they calling Borgonzi? I would see
But
that's
based upon that article, they would be calling Borgonzi.
But it
right?
sounds like Borgonzi
As they
that
should.
might have to
Yes.
go to Brinker and say, the Giants are on the phone. They are offering me this.
yeah.
Now, if Borgonzi says, I love that deal, I'm taking it.
But doesn't he have final say over the roster, Borgonzi?
That's what it's-
that
that's
is the
what it-
question of
Yeah.
final say.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
that is the
If he
question of
has
final
final
say,
say over the roster,
Do I have to get your permission or can I just say we have a deal?
but isn't that the
Yes.
normal structure of a GM having say over the roster, the final say over the roster?
Traditionally,
Traditionally, yes.
So why
absolutely.
is Brinker here?
yeah. That's the
Why?
good question.
So Brinker, what do you do? Because we don't need you. Because you're not essentially you're the one that's causing. Oh, we need somebody to make a tiebreaker.
Yes.
Ultimately, you don't need to be in place. You-
Okay, so here's another potential answer
Okay.
from Jim Wyatt, of course, of Titans.com in his Tuesday mailbag. He was asked a question from Neil in the United Kingdom. Jim Wyatt has fans
Oh.
across the pond.
Well, they
Oh.
played over there.
Neil
okay.
wants to know from Jim, can you offer up what Mike Borgonzi will do in his role as GM? It may seem like a stupid, obvious question, but what is the process he will go through once he takes over? Is that, let's see. Jim writes in part, what do I think his role will be as GM? I think he'll be in charge of putting together the 53-man roster with a mission to build a team that will be able to compete year in and year out. The head coach has control of his staff, but these guys will all work together alongside President of Football Operations Chad Brinker on the roster. It will be a process.
Again, you're not telling us anything.
There's
You're
a
making it
lot of
even more-
ambiguity.
Exactly.
There's
You're
a
making it
lot of
even
ambiguity.
more-
It goes
even
back
more.
to that. That's why I think it would be interesting to ask a hypothetical, not even a hypothetical.
didn't he
it's
just
what's
say-
going to happen, right? It's when you're fielding calls
Uh-huh.
for a trade of the first pick or
Yes.
decide, and you're on the clock, and you've got to make the decision.
Mhm.
In theory, if you haven't made the decision, when it's time, like you got to go up to the podium.
Mhm.
Are you accepting the trade or are you making the pick? That's when you have the decision. Like who does have the decision? Somebody has to break the tie. That is a central question.
Yeah,
And that's where you can't the answer you just read from Jim, it sounds great, but when the rubber hits the road and it's time you have to make the call.
So
but it
who
still
makes the call?
leaves everybody in this place of we don't know who's making the
here's
call because
the issue. Here's the issue. I have a quote
Uh-huh.
from Burke Nihill, Titans president and CEO. This was in the story that Jim Wyatt wrote when the news broke that the Titans had fired Rand Carthon. Nihill said Brinker will, quote unquote, break ties with respect to the 53-man roster. Quote, it is important to Amy to have absolute clarity in the football organization. And so, while the general manager position will have a primary responsibility on all these things Chad is describing in terms of the day-to-day of overseeing the roster and the coaching staff, Chad is the leader of the football program, so Chad will be the final authority on all football matters, including the roster. That was Burke Nihill after the team fired Rand Carthon.
again, it's these mixed messages.
So that's
coming out.
completely different than what Breer put. Fair to
Exactly.
say?
But then, based upon what Jim Wyatt said, Callahan has a say on his coaching staff, but based on what Albert Breer is saying, no, Brinker has say over the coaching staff.
Herein lies
It's
the problem.
Exactly.
Herein lies the problem. The
That's
Titans
why the
Too
are
many
press
cooks
conference
in the
is
kitchen.
important.
Too many
The press
cooks in the
conference
kitchen.
is important tomorrow
well,
for that reason.
Well, Rand is no longer cooking, so that's one less person out of the kitchen. But herein lies the problem. The Titans are flooding the zone. there is just a lot of stuff out there that seems to contradict
One another.
everything.
Yeah.
So that quote from Burke Nighthill, Chad will have final authority. Here's Albert Breer saying Mike Borgonzi will have final say on the roster. There's just too many conflicting messages in all of these things we've been hearing over the past couple of weeks. So I know somebody in that Chad Brinker news conference is going to ask this tomorrow, and I can't wait to hear what the answer is, or I won't be able to hear it. Actually, I'll have to read it. I would love an organizational depth chart. Like, you know how they have those like charts where it's like, okay, Amy Adams Strunk is up here, and underneath is Chad Brinker, and underneath here is Burke Nighthill, and underneath Brinker is Borgonzi, and underneath Borgonzi is Callahan. Like, I would love a chart breaking down the hierarchy, because there's just too much ambiguity. It's too confusing to follow, and that's why Titans fans are where they are in all of this.
Yes, again, it goes back to, what is any different now that you've hired a GM? What is any different from what you said prior to hiring your GM? You just read off what Burke Nighthill said. So how does it change that quickly? That, oh, no. Now Borgonzi has say in the final 53. Oh, but Brinkert is the tiebreaker. You can't have final say, but Brinkert is the tiebreaker.
That was the point that Jared
sense.
was making yesterday, if I recall correctly. That if Chad Brinker has veto power, therefore Mike Borgonzi does not have final say if Chad Brinker can overrule him. So, I mean, look.
I go back to, do I really care at the end of the day? No, but it is a very important question for what we just talked about. If there is a decision that has to be made, and on draft day is an example of, you have a finite amount of time. You can't go back into your room and say, well, let's talk about this with our whole group for the next couple of hours and we'll make a decision. Now, you can trade the first pick before draft day, right? They could make that decision as a group.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when you're on the clock on draft day trades happen. A great example is the A.J. Brown trade, right? That happened when they were on the clock, and Mike Vrabel got up famously out of the chair going, man, like you could tell he wasn't all on board on that, but they had to make a decision. And Robinson was the one that said, it's my decision. I've got to make the tough call. And he did. And we know what the result is now. But I think we would all wonder, if they were in that scenario, who makes the call. Another one that Jared's referred to that happened on our show years ago, Sally Reese revealed a story of a conflict between Jeff Fisher and Floyd Reese on draft day, where Floyd Reese wanted to draft Devin Hester. It was in the second round. He was ready to do it, but Jeff Fisher really made a strong case, a push for Lendale White from USC, and Floyd Reese acquiesced to Jeff Fisher. Now, how that got done, whether Floyd just said, okay, you want him that bad, he's the guy. In retrospect, Devin Hester turned out to be a much better player over the long haul than Lendale White, who certainly had his moments. But that's the kind of thing that, when you're in a pinch, that's when you have to make sure that you know who's got the call, who makes the final call.
Yeah, and right now it's like, okay, Brinker, in this situation, Brinker does, but why does he? If you are in control of the roster, which it seems like Borgonzi would be, it should be your decision. Like, okay, if you and the coach don't agree, then ultimately that's why you're the GM, to make that decision. You don't need a third party to say, oh, well, we both can't agree. Well, you make that's your job. Like, make the decision. If you don't agree with the head coach, either make the decision to say, I don't agree with you, but draft him, or I don't agree with you, I'm getting that player. Don't say I don't agree and let's go to him or her.
Here's one more. Remember Derrick Henry?
Yeah.
It was reported that they had a deal on the table with the Ravens to trade Derrick Henry, and Amy Adams Strunk said, no, I don't want to do that. So what was that process like? That they denied that, right? I'd love to know, in retrospect, how that process went, because who was there? Rand was there, Brinker was there. Like that was that group. And so how different is it now as opposed to then?
Well, it has been brought to my attention that Brian Callahan has addressed the new structure of the Titans organization. We will discuss that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, the game. D Mace, Fingan, and Donick 1025, 1063. The game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. I referenced Brian Callahan. He did an interview with A to Z Sports. He was asked about the new structure. David James is working tirelessly back at our Game Nashville studios to get a clip ready for us, and we will throw to that as soon as it's ready. So there are some other details in this article from Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated discussing the Titans hiring of Mike Borgonzi. He mentions that the hiring went down. He said, how did the hiring go down? It really started with the existing relationship between Brinker and Borgonzi. Both came into the NFL in 2009 and got to know each other on the road. More recently, because of the trust they share, they were the respective point men on trades involving L'Jarius Sneed and DeAndre Hopkins. And so that was the foundation off which Borgonzi's case was built the past few days as he started to win the interview. The Titans came to view him as the most complete candidate, both in his experience and in how he could articulate a clear plan for the franchise, and one that showed he was legitimately prepared for everything, be it in coaching, scouting, player development, sports science, analytics, whatever came his way. He showed he'd be ready. And I think one of the questions I am really interested to hear, I'm sure he's going to be asked this question tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I would love to know about his experience with the Chiefs at the beginning. David has the clip ready. We'll throw to it in just a moment about Brian Callahan. I would love to know about his experience at the beginning of his time with the Chiefs, because he got there in 2009. The Chiefs were not the team we know today.
Right.
I would love to know what that experience was like and what key lessons he learned from being a part of that rebuilding operation that he could then transfer here as the Titans try to build themselves back up.
I think that I would love to hear him elaborate on that experience, because I think you would draw from that, because they were at the time, they were the pre Andy Reid, they were pre obviously Patrick Mahomes. They were ways from that. They were struggling some as an organization.
Had the number one pick in 2013, I want to believe it was.
I think their last prior to Mahomes, and obviously Alex Smith before Mahomes. I think their last playoff game, it before Gonzalez left, or did they go when Travis Kelce his first year or two? Because they had a drought when they didn't go anywhere, which leads us to, Borgonzi and what did he learn, through all that process, and then obviously getting Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid.
So they missed the playoffs in 2011 and 2012.
Okay.
2012, they were 2-14. Mm-hmm. In 2013, which was Andy Reid's first season, they went 11-5 and lost in the wild card round. They missed the playoffs in 2014 at 9-7, and that started the run.
That's a pretty remarkable instant flip.
Yes.
When you have the first pick and then you win 11 games that first year, that doesn't happen very often.
No, absolutely not. The Albert Breer also writes in the story that Borgonzi was in a small decision-making circle in Kansas City with GM Brett Veach, Coach Andy Reid, and SVP of Football Operations / Strategy Chris Shea. So every decision made over the past 8 seasons in Kansas City had his fingerprints on it.
Okay, Borgonzi's fingerprint?
Yes.
Okay, you say he had a small role, but then you say his fingerprints are all on. Is it just by happenstance his fingerprints, like they were walking by, he just touched it and then along they went? Again, seriously.
I hear what you're saying.
Because when you say, it's like a contradiction to what you're saying. He had a very small role in what happened, but his fingerprints are all over.
Well, that's the question we all have in these
is
situations. That's the question we all have in these situations.
Like, did you do the murder or didn't you?
Right.
Like, your fingerprints are all over it.
Right.
Either you did or you didn't.
That's the question we all have in these situations. We see he's coming from the Chiefs, a winning organization, and we think, okay, well, how much did he really have to do? How much did he really have to do with the success of the Chiefs? And you know what? We'll never really know the answer to that. I certainly believe Albert Breer in that Borgonzi had a role in it. Just how big that role is, that's open to interpretation. But as I mentioned, Brian Callahan did an exclusive interview with A to Z Sports. He was asked about the structure of the Titans front office This is what Brian Callahan said to A to Z Sports.
Utility of this power structure itself, right? Because, and I do think there's probably more clarity now, the way that it is a single ladder down from Amy to Chad to Mike to you. What's your opinion on kind of a unique power structure you guys have in I guess bifurcating the GM responsibilities for what Chad is doing? What's the point?
Well, I think this isn't, I mean, I guess it is a bit unique around the league, but there's been places that have done things like this before. When I was in Denver, John Elway was the president of football ops, and, we had GM people. We had Brian Zanders at one point there. We had Matt Russell that I think had the GM title. I can't quite recall the titles, but it was a very similar setup. So it's not something that I haven't seen before. There's just so much that goes into these GM jobs nowadays, and it's really challenging for one person to manage all of it and build the roster. And I mean, there's just so much that goes into it that having really two talented, diverse ways of thinking, I think really is an advantage to an organization, the way that we're set up. I mean, Chad's experiences with Mike's experiences and mine, we've all seen championship teams. We've all been to Super Bowls. We've all won one. And I think all of that melds into a pretty good melting pot of ideas and experiences that I think can help us really improve our football team. So, structure-wise, it doesn't really feel much different to me in terms of the day-to-day, but everything we do, we still work together on. Very rarely at any point is anybody, walking up to the draft board and getting their hands slapped down because, no, I'm in charge of this and I'm in charge of that. That doesn't happen. We all work together trying to do the best we can for the organization, and our goal is to build a winning team as quickly as we possibly can.
That was Brian Callahan with A to Z Sports. I believe that is Easton Freeze conducting the interview. So
Brian,
there's
ain't nobody slapping hands. Come on now, off the.
Go ahead, D-Mace. Let it go.
I mean, listen. Again, I think he's trying to explain it the best way he know how. I think he's in self-preservation right now.
Yeah.
So he's like, man, I'm just worried about the day-to-day, really. I've been a part of the structure, but we all know. Listen, John, I'm glad he did say that, because what was John Elway's biggest thing? Man, I passed on Josh Allen. And John Elway wasn't the GM, was he? I don't think so. He was the president, and then they had a GM, which ultimately brings me back to, okay, well, why do you have a GM if ultimately you're making the last final decision? Why is the GM in place?
Well, wasn't this a report from Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, Willie, recently that the league had to sort of
Yeah, there was a discussion of let's define what the GM is,
right?
Because it had to do with Rooney Rule. It had to do with
this is how
permission to get invitees, right,
Yeah.
or interview people.
Right.
If you're asking permission, you have to be offering them a promotion.
Yeah.
And they had to define, is this actually a promotion if it's the second guy in charge? And they had to prove, I think the key was that the league did say, okay, yes, this is the supreme. Maybe that's when it changed from the time that Nihill said
that
Brinker will have the last say,
that's
Breer's
possible.
article, because the league had to clarify that and said, the league had said after discussing this that this is the principal decision-making position.
Listen.
Again, muddying the waters and creating several different ways to look at it.
Bert Nihill said the quiet thing out loud. He didn't mean to say it, but when you're that smart, sometimes you run your mouth too damn much and you give too much information. You said the quiet thing out loud, and then when everybody got wind of it, it was like, holy moly. We said what we shouldn't have said. The NFL is about to get in here. Now we need to change some things right quick. Oh, no. That's not what we meant. No. This is what that title would entail. Look, the GM is going to be a GM, and the president is going to be a president. No, Bert Nihill said the quiet thing out loud. He didn't mean to say it, which tells me it's going to be the way that Bert Nihill said it's going to be. And we're not gonna know that it's not, because they're gonna tell us one thing in this press conference, as they have told us in previous press conferences. And then all of a sudden, things happen. And if things start trickling out of the building, and it's contrary to what you said at the beginning. And I think it's going to be the same way here. I hope it's not, but I tend to believe it's going to be the same way here. You're going to tell us all this stuff, make it look good so the NFL don't come down on you in regards to the Rooney Rule, but yet still behind closed doors, it's going to be the way Bert Nighill said it. And if anybody gets fired, you sign the NDA and you can't say a damn thing. How convenient is that, everybody? That you say the quiet thing out loud. That's why you just need to listen to people. When you listen to people, you find out what they really feel and how they truly see things. You said the quiet thing out loud and then said, holy moly, the NFL is about to get involved. And then you change directions and then you tell us this is what it's going to be so the NFL can get off your back. And then you make the GM sign a non-disclosure clause so when he gets fired, if it doesn't go right, he can't talk. How convenient, Rand Carthon, John Robinson possibly. How convenient.
615-737-1025. Let's see if we get.
Man, they're smart. They are smart, man.
But it's a question
They
for
are
Brinker.
smart.
It's a question for Brinker. Can you elaborate on the reported
Yes.
NFL discussion on the definition of the GM job? Because there seemed to be some confusion. That's the question.
That's a good question. And I imagine someone will ask him that tomorrow. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingen here with you, Bridgestone Arena. Predators and Sharks tonight to wrap up this 5-game homestand. I know that you're going to be bundled up if you're coming to the game tonight because it's so cold, but you might need to be wearing your gloves and your hats and your earmuffs in here. It is freezing.
Prepare some layers
It is
accordingly.
freezing
I think
in
when
here.
everybody, the 17,000 plus, get in here, it will not be quite as chilly as it is now. But right now,
That
we
is
are
true.
trying to manage the chilly temperatures.
Yes, my fingers are turning red.
We're also right next to the outside where some of the staff has their cars parked. And when they open that breezeway, woo, we're getting that 19-degree air
It is
blowing
woo.
through.
It is cold.
It's blowing a little colder than it has been in previous weeks.
It is a little nippy outside. So be prepared if you're coming to the game tonight. So we've been talking a lot about how the front office of the Tennessee Titans is structured. And Albert Breer, in the story we've been referencing throughout the program, had another interesting section of his story talking about how the Titans front office, and he also mentions the Commanders front office as well, could perhaps change the dynamic of how front offices are structured in the NFL. He writes in part, quote, "You hear a lot from personnel people about how the GM job is too big to just put a scout in charge. Tennessee's new structure is an implicit acknowledgement of that. So wouldn't it make sense for other teams to have someone to put the right scout, cap guy, and coach in place with oversight over them to ensure everyone stays aligned? That's just a thought I've had. And if you can find someone who's got an eye for finding the right people to build around, I think it would make a ton of sense given the scope of these jobs in 2025. So is what we're seeing in Tennessee, could that be could that become the norm throughout the league?
I mean, listen, if what you're doing isn't working, it possibly can be. But I would tend to believe that those teams that have things working, they're going to keep their structure the way they are. They may be like what the Titans are choosing to do now, or it may be sort of in that traditional sort of realm. Again, I'm just looking at it from this standpoint. They make it like maybe, the GM job isn't what it used to be because of all of these other things that you sort of added to the mix. But the GM job should always be, I have control over the team, the roster. And the way Bert Nighill made it seem is that, well, Borgonzi, that's not the case in this situation. Yeah, our structure is different, but in this case also, you don't have final say. Brinkert has final say, which on the website, the title is Football Executive Leadership. And then Bert Nihill's title is Business Executive Leadership. So you got somebody overseeing, obviously from the business executive leadership standpoint, Bert Nihill oversees Adolph Birch, Haley Davison, all these people underneath him. So what you're saying now is Chad Brinker oversees, Borgonzi and Callaway, which tend to make me believe, as I do in Bert Nihill, in his role, he has final say and control over the business executive leadership and everybody that falls underneath him. Chad Brinker has those same responsibilities. Am I reading it right? Am I looking at it right? So if that's the case, you might as well be the GM, right or wrong. That's the way I'm looking at it. And I can understand why Jared looked at it like that yesterday. Because again, if you are the head of everybody, don't you have final say? Or it's just, I'm ahead of everybody, but that guy got final say over the roster. But Bert Nihill said you do. So which one is it?
It's an important distinction. Hopefully they know. Hopefully Borgonzi knows.
I hope it works. Listen,
Yeah.
I hope it works. I do, because if it doesn't work this season, then we know Brian Callahan more than likely is out. But does that mean Borganzi is out too? Because it didn't work. And
He's not going to be fired after one season.
Well, we don't know that.
I guess that is true.
Yeah.
You never know. But this is what Albert Breer was talking about. He said, quote, Washington GM Adam Peters was brought into the league from his alma mater, UCLA, by then Patriots VP of Player Personnel Scott Pioli in 2003. 6 years later, and then in Kansas City, Pioli plucked Borgonzi from a Boston College program that proved over the years to be fertile ground for the former Chiefs GM. And if you keep digging, many more names spring out. It starts with Ravens GM Eric DaCosta, whom Pioli helped bring to Baltimore in his 1 year there. Then there's Bob Quinn, Jason Light, Nick Caserio, Thomas Dimitroff, John Robinson, Monty Ossenfort, and Peters, who were all hired by Pioli in New England and went on to become GMs. Pioli also had Brian Flores and Josh McDaniels on his Patriots personnel staff, with both becoming head coaches. Then there were the hires of Borgonzi and Ryan Poles, also from Boston College and Kansas City. So Breer continues, it makes me wonder about the idea of a team bringing a guy like Pioli aboard to be an over the top type of football executive at some point down the line. I'm wondering if Breer is maybe connecting these dots with Brinker, and Brinker maybe having a similar role, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, and he can only refer back to his days, at his previous stops, in regards to how the hierarchy was. And again, if he feels if he chooses to, because obviously Amy had to sign off on it. And, this is the way I'm sure he explained it to her. So whatever Amy signed off to, this is what it is. And again, I just hope it works. Because if it doesn't, we're going to be back in the same situation in regards to how we are sort of looking at it or how we're talking about it. We're going to be back to who's in charge, why didn't it work, who you going to hire as a head coach now, is the GM on a hot seat, are you going to give him time like you said, which one is it? Because if it doesn't start off the way you want it to, then are you truly going to be committed to giving it time? Or are you going to say, well, no, Bill, Brian, you're out. Yeah, Bill, you're out too. But Brian, you're out. And then Borganzi, you got another year to get this right. If not, you're out. But all the while, Chad Brinker, who's making the final decisions on the roster, based upon what Bert Nighthill said, is safe in all of this.
Some breaking news from, I don't know who this is, from Mark Zenitz, a national college football, Matt Zenich, a national college football reporter for CBS Sports. The Patriots are targeting Lions defensive line coach and former Titans coach Terrell Williams to be their new defensive coordinator under Mike Vrabel.
No surprise there.
Yeah,
No.
none whatsoever.
Deep respect for one another there.
He made him interim head coach.
He did, and he let him actually coach the preseason game. Remember that was there's a lot of respect there.
It has been reported that
surprise.
Terrell Williams could be the defensive coordinator for Mike Vrabel with the New England Patriots. I did see that Mike Vrabel is retaining the Patriots special teams coach, so it appears that Craig Ackerman will not have a job on the Patriots staff.
That's also not a surprise.
Speaking of special teams coaches, we're still away. I mean, another question that I'm hoping is answered today, but may not be until tomorrow. We talked about James Bones Fossil.
Yeah, Jim Bone Fossil.
Yes.
John Bone Fossil.
John Bones Fossil. I didn't want to call him Jim, which is his father. Being hired as special teams coordinator. What does that mean for Colt Anderson? Speaking of special teams coordinators that Titans fans love, like Craig Ackerman, I'm curious to see what happens there.
But again, I mean, listen, is this a situation where, I said it earlier, and it seems like Borgonzi has say in the coaching staff, if we are to believe what Albert Breer said, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he has say over the coaching staff. Maybe it hasn't been made official because Brian Callahan is trying to figure out what to do with Colt Anderson in regards to retaining him on his staff. And if you do retain him, am I going to move him somewhere else? Because they already have an assistant special teams coach right now. So he wouldn't, I'm sure they wouldn't demote him to assistant special teams coach. I'm pretty sure they will put him in some other area within the team. So you got to see what's going to happen with that. And is that being done because now Borganzi is now in the mix, and now they're trying to, they're sort of double teaming this Borganzi and Callahan together. Borganzi having more to say, and they're trying to figure out what to do with Colton Anderson.
One texter says, can you clear this up for the non-media people out here? Is it common for a non-recorded news conference like Chad Brinker is doing tomorrow? Seems fishy and another reason not to trust that guy. Is it common?
I mean, Callahan did it a lot last season on like Fridays.
So
or on
I think
Thursdays.
I think that's different because the NFL head coaches, they would do that a lot. They wouldn't have the traditional stand behind the podium after practice news conference, right? The last practice of the week.
They used to do that at the beginning of the week.
Right. They would just huddle with the reporters and answer those questions. So I understand what you're saying, David. I think this is just a little bit different because of who it is. I can't recall in my experience having this happen, so I can't say definitively if it's common or uncommon. However, it feels uncommon that an executive would hold a press availability, and that press availability would not be streamed to the public, especially in today's climate. A lot of these things are. I mean, there used to be a time where news conferences weren't streamed,
which makes me believe that he will not be a part of the Borganzi interview other than introducing him, because if that was the case, why then as a report, if I'm Paul Kaharski or TD or anybody that wants to be a part of it, why would I go to a Borganzi Chad Brinker's presser when I can just go to the Borganzi? He's there, and I can ask him the questions that I really want to ask him, and they will be on the record. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like,
well, the Chad Brinker stuff is also on the record.
yeah, but it's not live streamed now, because we don't know if the interview with Borganzi will be streamed.
I imagine that will be.
So again, it goes to, well, Brinker's going to be a part of it. Why do I need to go to the one before? Because I can just ask him all the questions live.
Well, as I said earlier, the example I used was in 2020 when the Predators fired Peter Laviolette. They had a game the following day, and John Hines was going to coach his first game as Predators coach. David Poyle held a news conference in the downstairs room, answered questions about the firing of Peter Laviolette, and then John Hines came in afterward, so that all of the questions about Peter Laviolette had been asked already, so that the focus was on John Hines talking about becoming Predators coach.
But see, you're talking about an organization that does things in a proper order and
Perhaps,
don't look
yes.
to hide things from people. But the way it seems like with the Titans organization, again, this is the assumption. I'm not saying that it's true, but the assumption is that they're hiding everything, that they're backstabbing and doing all this other stuff, and they don't want to show you really what's going on.
Well, Chad Brinker is sort of this shadowy figure for in the Titans organization, or at least among Titans fans. Maybe he's like Oz. I think that's like the Wizard of Oz, right? He's behind the curtain.
Yes.
Nobody knows what he looks
Don't
like.
look behind the curtain. There's
Right.
no one there.
Exactly. Nobody knows. I mean, people know what he looks like. People know what he looks like because you could look up a picture. But he's done very few news conferences. I think most of his interviews have been relegated to team specific outlets, their podcast and such. So for a lot of Titans fans, he's like the boogeyman, almost Chad Brinker. That's just kind of how it is.
And adding intrigue as he was brought in by Rand Carthon.
Right. And then has since usurped Rand Carthon as the supreme ruler of football. So I'm just wondering if from a PR standpoint, I think it would have been a good idea for fans to hear Chad Brinker. Like, we'll read the quotes.
He's a real person.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a real person. He's not.
And in fairness, he did do a couple of very lengthy interviews last summer or spring, whatever it was,
Yeah.
on the podcast. And I think he is very conversational,
But he's in a different
interesting,
role now.
unique.
He's in a
But,
different role.
Yeah, I think he could conduct himself fine in that scenario.
Well, I don't think he wouldn't be able to conduct himself the way a supreme ruler of football should. But when you asked him those questions last year, and I'm not saying you, Willie, but when those questions of him was asked last year, he was in a whole different role. We assume Rand did all of the, who's going to be on the roster, who's not. Come to find out, it may not have been that way. And now, if you do that same interview, you're answering questions based upon the new role that you're in that you quite haven't defined, that you've been sort of ambiguous with. Because 1 minute you're the GM and you have final say, according to Bert Nihil. But then on the other hand, I'm not the GM. Don't put that on me. It's that guy. I just hired him. It's that guy. It's Borgonzi. Me.
I'm just glad that we will hear from them in some form tomorrow. We'll read the quotes.
I'm
we'll
very
hear.
excited for this,
Yes.
so we can get off of this subject because we are.
No,
we
we're
have-
not getting
we
off
have-
of it, Willie.
Well, not get off of it, but we'll have actually some.
Yeah.
We'll hear from them directly instead
Yes.
of us speculating and, trying to read people's minds and.
And 3 days, well, it would have been 3 days.
It's been
It would
about a
have been
week.
3
Yeah.
days to formulate
It's been a few days.
their responses to
Right.
all the answers to the questions they believe they
Have
will
they,
be
do you
getting.
think they've done some mock press
I'm
conferences?
sure they have.
Just like,
Absolutely.
I was just watching.
Here
So
these are the questions to expect.
my
Uh-huh.
comfort show is The West Wing.
Yes, I love the West.
It's just it calms me before I go to sleep. And I was just watching an episode where they were doing a mock news conference with President Bartlett. So I imagine Chad Brinker is sitting in there with the Titans communication staff, and maybe somebody is impersonating Jared Stillman. Jared Stillman will be at the news conference tomorrow. He's going to say, Chad Brinker, did you stand Brad Carathon in the back?
That is a very good question. When you're doing a mock press conference and you're saying, here's the scouting report on the different people.
Yes.
Do you imitate a Paul Kuharsky? Do you imitate a John Glennon? Do you imitate Jared Stillman? When you give the questions,
Yes.
just so you know who you're, or do you have like the cutout, the fat head? Here's the headshot. Here's this guy. This is what he's going to do. Paul will try to ask 7 consecutive questions. You might have to cut him off in the middle to let somebody else ask a question.
On the podium, there's just going to be headshots of all of the reporters. It's like there'll be a picture of Paul. There'll be a picture of
Cardboard
Jared.
cutouts.
Yes, there'll be a picture of Tehran.
With somebody hiding behind them, speaking for them.
I'm hoping that they are indeed
man.
imitating each person because I find that to be quite humorous.
Look how we're making light of this, man. It's
We're
ridiculous
trying
in a
to-
sense.
we're trying,
Yes,
yeah.
we're-
It's just
we're
football,
trying,
man.
yeah.
It's just
But I agree. It'll be very good to hear from them tomorrow.
Yes.
We'll have hopefully substantive quotes to listen to or read, and we'll be able to move this conversation along. We've been sort of stuck in neutral, talking about what could be. Hopefully, we'll have a bit more clarity tomorrow. 615-737-1025. We will take a Titans breather here. The Nashville Predators are back in action tonight against the San Jose Sharks. The Predators have won 3 in a row. They have an interesting opportunity over the next couple of weeks. We'll discuss that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Okay, it's time to tell you about Loan Pronto. And it's 2025. What could you do with a few extra $1,000? $75,000, $100,000. You're like, wait a minute, where do I get all of this? If you're a homeowner, you can get that type of cash in less than a week with your home's equity through Loan Pronto. They're the leader in quickly converting home equity into cold hard cash so you can pay the bills, credit card bills that have a high interest rate, a car payment you want to get done. Stop paying interest every month. Pay off the car. Loan Pronto has several easy options to let you access that cash, and there's no paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, often no appraisal. The average homeowner has over $300,000 in equity, and that's your money. You can use it however you please. One client got $150,000 out paid off their credit card bills, 2 car loans, and a personal loan, cutting their monthly expenses by $1,500 per month. So get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit bill up front. Call Loan Pronto, 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com, 615-499-5780, or loanpronto.com. Get the money you need. Equal housing lender. NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. The Nashville Predators have won 3 consecutive games. They'll look to make it 4 tonight against the San Jose Sharks. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6 right here on 1025, 1063 the game. Unfortunately, no Yaroslav Askarov in net tonight. He played yesterday, robbing us of that juicy storyline. But nevertheless,
You have to stay up late Thursday night. He would likely be in there on that occasion.
yes, the Predators head out on the road after this game. They go to San Jose on Thursday, so you'll have to wait and watch it then. But this was the Sharks' only visit to Nashville this season. So I was certainly looking forward to potentially seeing Askarov versus Saros at Bridgestone Arena. Unfortunately, that won't happen. But the Predators, Willie, have an interesting opportunity here. They just went through a month and a half stretch where they played a lot of the top teams in the NHL. They played Dallas, Colorado, Los Angeles, Carolina, Winnipeg a couple of times, Minnesota a couple of times. They played Washington. They played Vegas. A tough schedule.
Yeah, those are top 10. I don't know if they're all still in the top 10, but if they're not, they're very close. That's upper third, if not top 5 division leading kind of teams.
Yes, and I went back and I looked at the Predators' record since December 12th, and the reason why I picked that date was because that was the game that the Predators ended their 8-game winless streak by winning on the road at Dallas. The Predators have a 9-6-1 record over those 16 games. And one thing that's evident in looking at the numbers and watching the games, Willie, is that the Predators are starting to find their stride offensively. Not to get too technical, but when you start looking at some of the underlying numbers, the quality of shots they're generating, I mean, shooting percentage is obviously up. That was bound to regress to the mean. But when you're looking at the shot quality that they're generating, the scoring chances, all of those things, they're in line with what we saw last season and what we expected from the team this season. So the fact that they seem to be finding their groove there, plus the fact that they did it against top competition. Nobody can look at these past 15, 16 games and say, well, the Predators have only won 9 games because they've been beating up on bad teams.
Right.
They haven't won all of these games, but they've been competitive in most of these games against top-tier competition. They're starting to play better. The reason why I think they have an interesting opportunity is between now and mid-February, when the league takes a 2-week break for this 4 Nations international tournament that they're doing, their schedule gets much, much softer. The Sharks are the worst team in the NHL. They're going to play them 2 games in a row. They played Buffalo, I believe, twice in this stretch. They're the 3rd worst team in the league. They're playing Chicago again. They're the 2nd worst team in the league.
Anaheim.
They're right there as well. Like their schedule is getting really soft. And look, I am on the side of
It won't remain soft the rest of the year, but this next stretch of 9 games
But that
is
helps
much
you
softer.
build momentum.
Well, if you
heading
remember
into those
last
tough
year,
games.
they put together a 5-game road winning streak where they went through California and swept San Jose, LA, and Anaheim. So that seemed to get them going. Now, when we say the opportunity, there's 9 games left. They've got a couple other games in there too. Ottawa, at Pittsburgh, and Vancouver. 3 bubble teams that are not upper tier, upper echelon good teams, but certainly not the caliber of Winnipeg, Vegas, Washington, the teams that they've been playing a lot lately. So what can they do with that? That is a huge question for me.
But
and
the
we
way-
know they have no margin for error. They would have to go on a miraculous run like they did last year to even get into the discussion. They're further back than they were last year. When they went 16-0-2, and I can't remember exactly, it might have been 5 to 7 points out at the time. Now they're still looking way up at the second wild card, and you've got 6 or 7 really rock-solid teams that don't look like they're going to go anywhere. Somebody would really have to have the wheels fall off to open up another spot. So it's going to be even tougher than last year. But at the same time, you still would feel better about this is the team that they put together. This is what it's supposed to look like. It's getting closer to that the way they've been playing.
But it just looks like a different team now. So
Yes.
when you head into this stretch, I could see if this stretch was at, 10 games after the beginning of the season where, they were just trying to look for answers. And then all of a sudden, now you run into that rough patch. Okay, the likelihood you believe of, you winning that game is slim because of the way you have been playing. But you look at what they've been able to do now. It seems like everyone's starting to find their roles, their little niche within the team. I feel more comfortable with this team as it sits now, heading into this tougher part of their schedule than I did when they first started the season.
If my math is correct, Willie, when the Predators entered the game against the Blues, that started that 18 game point streak in mid-February,
which is the day they decided not to go to the Sphere, right? That's when that happened. Yeah.
They were 4 points back of the Blues for the final wild card spot in the Western Conference. When the 18 game point streak started, they were 4 points back of the final wild card spot. Today, they are 12 points back of the final wild card.
So
spot.
it's a different angle of steepness that they have to climb.
So
because the hole they dug was so much deeper.
Here would be my best case scenario for the Predators the remainder of the season. That they're competitive in all of these games. And we're starting to see that even in the games they lost over this month and a half stretch. They've been competitive in these games. There haven't been many games where they've been blown off the ice surface. Even if the score says they have, if the score was lopsided, the process was good. I think you're starting to see that. The best case scenario is that they play competitively, but they still lose more than they win, because the Predators do have an opportunity, which they haven't had very many times in their franchise history, to pick at or near the top of the NHL draft. So I think it's important, to Derek's point, that they build and they show that the first half of the season was just the flukiest of all flukes. And they're building momentum toward next season, but they're not jeopardizing their opportunities to have a top draft pick. I don't know if you could do both of those things, but that would be the best case scenario.
And I will give Jared a lot of credit, because I was listening last week to his interview with Barry Trotz, and he asked a similar type of question philosophically to him, because I think what he asked him is what is likely the most likely scenario. Anything can happen, right? But the most likely scenario, the way they're playing right now, is Jared asked, would you rather just have the wheels fall off, play terrible, and get a top 2-3 pick in the lottery, whatever, you're in the lottery, as opposed to you start playing really well, but you end up picking 10th or 11th because you're just on the outside. You play better and you feel better about where they're going for next year, but your pick is lower. And Barry Trotz did not hesitate at all. And he said, I would rather pick 10th.
Right.
He said, I just cannot sign up for, I want to lose games. And I think the way they're playing right now, again, this is why I think we circle these games coming up before the break, because it's going to position you for, there's only a couple weeks until the trade deadline after that tournament is over and the season resumes. But it also is your chance to make up ground. And what if you were 4 points out when that tournament starts, when the break happens, or 6 points out as opposed to 12? If you can really wipe the floor with some of these teams, and if they play the way they've been playing, and I even think there's reason to believe that they can even play better. Their numbers would indicate that they should be scoring even more goals than they're scoring. Let's not forget, they're still like 30th in the league in goals per game, but they're getting way more chances. The quality, the structure that they're playing with should lead to more success, especially when they play a lower level of team. So I think that would, I'm sure, be frustrating for a lot of fans to say, oh boy, they're going to finish 10th in the West, and they're going to end up picking 12th, 10th, whatever it is. They're going to miss an opportunity to actually cash out and get a high draft pick.
But listen, that may be in theory. It works in theory, but when you sort of put skates to ice, you may want that as a fan or someone else, but all of it falls on the head coach. Like if you're picking 1 or 2, more than likely your head coach is getting fired. So to me, you can't, a GM can't go in and say, I want to take, unless in his mind, he believes that no matter what, you're going to be my coach no matter what, or you're not going to be my coach no matter what. So I think once you have an idea, you can say, well, I would rather pick.
But here's the thing:
rather pick number 1 and lose more time, more times than not as the season ends.
Everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
In the first half of the season. In fact, you're familiar, Adam, with the PDO stat, which is your shooting percentage plus your save percentage, which is by and large, long story short, an indicator of how fortunate, how lucky your team has been or unlucky. They are last in the league in PDO, 90.980 at all strengths, which means they've had virtually no puck luck. But the bottom line is they messed up the season early on. They dug too big of a hole. But if you look at the way this team is playing, there's no way they can finish unless everybody gets hurt. They can't possibly finish low enough to get a top 5 pick. They're going to win too many games. They have an elite goaltender. They have a top first line now that is carving up opponents. Let's take what happened over the weekend. They whipped the Wild. That game could have been out of control. Marc-Andre Fleury made some pretty good saves to keep it 4-1. It easily could have been 7-1. That's how badly they beat them. They dominated Vegas to get up 4-0. They're playing really well right now. And it's still likely too late to save the season. Anything can happen. They'll have to get to another level. But to think that they're going to finish with a top 5 pick, I don't think is realistic unless they just completely have the wheels fall off. I don't think that's going to happen. It's much more likely that they're going to play like this. They whipped Minnesota Saturday. Minnesota turned around and went to Colorado and won yesterday with the same group of guys. So they're playing against top teams and playing very, very well. So now I'm really curious to see what they do with this portion. These 2 Sharks games are really interesting. The Sharks are kind of scrappy. They've got high-end talent. They're rebuilding. They're doing what a lot of Predator fans wish they would have done. They've got a lot of top 2, 3, 4 picks in the lineup. They're all super young. In a few years, that could turn into wins. But right now, you've got to try to exploit them.
Predators and Sharks tonight. Puck drop at 7. Pregame at 6. Right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Barry Trotz will join Jared Stillman at 5 o'clock, as he does every Tuesday. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. You can give us your thoughts on the Predators, the Titans, whatever you want. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mays, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The game live at Bridgestone Arena. Predators and Sharks tonight. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6. Barry Trotz at 5 with Jared, who is coming up next right here on 1025, 1063. The game. So as we discussed earlier in the program, Chad Brinker will hold I guess I'll call it a news conference, although it's not going to be live streamed. We won't be able to carry it live. Live tweeting is allowed, however, so the reporters in the room, Teron Davenport, Paul Kaharski, Nick Suss, John Glennon, Teresa Walker, Terry McCormick, the list goes on.
Jared Stillman.
Jared Stillman. Will Jared Stillman be at this news conference tomorrow?
Absolutely.
All right, Jared Stillman will be live at the You Can't Hear It, You Can Only Read About It news conference at 10 o'clock with Chad Brinker. Mike Borgonzi, new Titans GM, will be available at 11 o'clock and a traditional news conference, which will be carried live on our program, basically right off the jump tomorrow at 11 o'clock. So looking forward to hearing what Mike Borgonzi has to say. As we said before, I'm looking forward to hearing something from somebody. The question is, of course, are we going to hear what we want to hear? Are we going to get any clarity as to what's going on in this Titans front office tomorrow when we hear from Chad Brinker or read from Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi?
I'm not sure what we're going to hear outside of, listen, they're going to dress it all up. They're going to say all of what they assume to be the right things in regards to structure, who's running what, yada, yada, yada. And they're hoping that, they start winning on the field so you won't ask these questions anymore. So I don't expect to hear anything earth-shattering. I'm sure they will get peppered with question after question, trying to get something out of them. But I expect Brinker, especially, in his, I don't even know what to call it, a press conference, his availability.
It is a news conference in the sense that people will be there and people will be able to ask him questions.
Yeah.
But it is unique, at least to me, that it is not going to be live streamed, especially since nowadays everything is live streamed. I mean, for example, Andrew Burnett, when he talks before a game or after a game, those aren't streamed live, but the Predators, shortly after it's done, send you a video with the questions and the answers. But the Titans aren't even doing that. All we'll be able to hear from Chad Brinker is what we see on Twitter and what's written in the subsequent stories. So I find that to be a bit peculiar. As I said,
I wonder, when they made that decision, what was the thought process behind that in this day and age when, as you said, almost everything can be found digitally, right? You can find the video of virtually any press conference. You can probably pull up Mike Vrabel's press conference after week 6.
You absolutely can.
2019 season.
You could. You absolutely could. Everything is documented these days. I mean, we've had this on the text line a couple of times, and I know Jared is going to mention this when he comes on the air.
But there was a purpose behind the scenes of that.
Yes.
And we can all speculate what it is, but I just
perhaps the Titans
thinking that is an advantage. I just wonder what the strategy is there.
Perhaps the Titans don't want those clips being played over and over again.
But we're going to still read everything
Yes.
and say that over and over and over, and we might be more inclined to misinterpret.
That is
the
true.
print, as we said, throwing up in the bullpen. Is that you're actually throwing up in the bullpen, or you're throwing up in the bullpen? Two very different things.
That is, I mean,
same
that is
words.
true.
Same words.
That is true.
That's my thought to the Titans. They won't listen. They've already made the decision.
Yeah, I mean, I would.
So we're going to be throwing up, or we're going to be throwing up tomorrow.
Hopefully, no one will be throwing up or throwing up in this news conference, but perhaps we might.
Or throwing down.
Throwing down.
Sometimes throwing down can mean something.
Yeah.
But
back in the day.
I am curious to hear from Mike Borgonzi, just because, as we also talked about earlier in the program, there seems to be a lot of mixed messaging coming out of Titans headquarters as to who has the ultimate say in roster-related decisions. We read the quote from Burke Nihill after the team fired Rand Carthon that Chad Brinker was in charge of the football operation. Then Albert Breer, in a report with Sports Illustrated, says that Mike Borgonzi will have final say over the roster. A lot of ambiguity. I'm praying that tomorrow we will have some clarity on this. It would be very important for all of us and our sanity to have some clarity on the power structure in the organization.
I'm sure someone is going to ask him, well, why did Bert Nihill say that Brinker had say over the roster,
right?
Final say over the roster, but now you're saying that's not the case. Why did it change so quickly? Did you change it because the NFL, stepped in, or did you misspeak, or is that actually what you said is going to be the case? So those are things that I'm sure people will ask, and I'm sure they're going to want an answer, and not just something that you just throw out there. They want a legitimate answer to that. I did like what Jared said. I think it was last week. He said, if you put John Robinson and Brinker together, that's what you get. Borgonzi is the guy. And I went back because I looked at it before, but I didn't think it. And I went back and looked at it. I was like,
but
yes,
you saw
he's
it.
right.
You saw it. Yeah. Now you can't unsee it.
Absolutely.
Is what you're saying. Yeah, I think
Brinker. That's what I'm gonna call him now.
We've come up with too many nicknames for this guy, but I would love to have some clarity. I would love to know who does what, who reports to who. The question that we talked about, the hypothetical, and I think Jared mentioned this on his show yesterday as well. If Mike Borgonzi wants to draft Travis Hunter, but Chad Brinker loves him some Cam Ward, how do they figure it out?
Callahan has the final say, right?
Unfortunately, I think that's one thing I do know is that Brian Callahan does not have final say in this situation.
What if Callahan said, I understand, no, but I want that guy. And then what happens? I guess Callahan, you just be quiet and sit over there
and weigh that with what's the best offer for the first pick.
Yeah,
like that. How's that process work? I think the process of how they'll go about deciding what to do with that enormous asset of having the first pick is a big question.
Ooh,
right. Ben on our text line says it's gotten to the point to where it doesn't really matter what they do or want us to think until we start contending for championships. It's all just a mess. But part of getting back to respectability is having an organization that appears to be on the same page when it comes to the people making the decisions. And that has not been the case since the Titans fired John Robinson. It's just been, we've been asking the question, who has final say, who's in charge, since the Titans hired Rand Carthon, because it was an arranged marriage with Mike Vrabel, and there were a lot of questions about that. Well, was it really Rand Carthon's first year, or is it his second year? We talked about that a lot,
Sure.
right? So there's just been so much confusion over how this organization runs that hopefully bringing in someone from the Chiefs, again, not a guarantee that just because you hire someone from a winning organization means that you are going to become a winning organization, but hopefully I'm just as interested in Borgonzi. I think a lot of people are interested in Brinker. I'm just as interested in Borgonzi. I'm hoping that he will lay out a clear vision of how this organization can get back to respectability and no longer be a laughingstock within the NFL.
And again, that's ultimately, it's what is are you fielding a good team? Are you fielding a winning team? That's ultimately going to be, the question and how we see it after the season. Did this new structure field a winning team? Do we feel different about this team moving forward than we have the last 3 years? Ultimately, that's what's going to be the case. And I hope that the answer is yes. We feel much better about this team moving forward. Yes. Whereas we may not have liked, how it all went down, or we may have thought it was shady, and it possibly could be shady. The end results were they are winning on the field now. That's all that matters. But if they don't get to that point, they're going to continue to hear the same old things about this organization.
Besides trying to get on take your next shot of how you're going to address the quarterback, I don't think we can emphasize this enough how important it will be to maximize, and the two could be one and the same if they draft a quarterback, but to maximize having the first pick. John Robinson really sped up the process of they were last, right, when he took over. When he wielded the first pick into the assets he did, it wasn't perfect, but he sped up. He effectively sped up the rebuild, and they were on their way to starting to string together some winning seasons.
That'll do it for us today. Mike Borgonzi addresses reporters at 11 o'clock. We will carry that live. Stillman and Company coming up next, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a wonderful, blessed Tuesday. Peace.